first time anyone noticed the new nurse. She was standing alone at the far end of the emergency ward, carefully adjusting the blanket of a sleeping patient. She moved quietly, almost as if she had trained herself to take up as little space as possible. While the other nurses rushed from room to room, calling out updates and checking monitors, she stayed calm. Her hands never shook. Her face never showed panic. She simply observed, listened, and acted when needed. That should have earned respect. Instead, it made people suspicious. At North Ridge Military Medical Center, confidence had to be proven loudly. Doctors there were used to people who spoke fast, moved faster, and reminded everyone how skilled they were. The new nurse did none of that. She arrived on a rainy Monday morning, carrying one worn duffel bag and a folder of transfer papers. Her name badge read, Lieutenant Avon Rhodes, RN. She was younger than many expected, early 30s perhaps, but there was something older in her expression. Her eyes carried a kind of stillness that didn't match her age. She looked like someone who had seen too much and learned to keep it hidden. The hospital administrator welcomed her with a brief handshake and a quick orientation before assigning her to the busiest floor in the building. By noon, everyone knew about her. Not because she introduced herself. Because she didn't. Who transfers into this unit without saying 2 words? One nurse whispered in the break room. She barely looked at anyone, another replied. A senior resident doctor, known for his sharp opinions, shrugged and said, confidence without explanation is usually a bad sign. That opinion spread quickly. And Avon noticed. She noticed the side glances, the lowered voices, the subtle pauses when she entered a room. She noticed how some doctors corrected her even when she had done nothing wrong. Still, she said nothing. She worked. On her second day, she stepped into a trauma room just as a patient's oxygen levels began to drop. The attending physician was barking orders, and the nurses scrambled to respond. Avon stood near the monitor for only a moment before moving to the patient's side. She adjusted the patient's position, checked the airway, and calmly requested a different medication dosage. The attending doctor frowned. That's not your call. Avon looked at him, her tone steady. It will be in 90 seconds when his response worsens. The room went silent. The doctor ignored her and continued his plan. 85 seconds later, the patient's condition shifted exactly as she predicted. The medication was changed. Within minutes, the patient stabilized. No one thanked her. Instead, the attending doctor turned to another nurse and muttered, "Lucky guess." Avon heard it. She simply walked away. That became the pattern. She kept making observations others missed. She anticipated complications before they happened. She knew small details that even experienced staff overlooked. And each time, instead of admiration, it created more doubt. People began asking questions. Where had she worked before? Why were parts of her service record sealed? Why had someone with her credentials transferred into a hospital role that seemed far beneath her experience? No one found answers. Her file was frustratingly limited. A few overseas deployments, advanced trauma certification, special commendations listed without explanation. And then a quiet transfer request. No details, no references, no public history. That mystery made people uneasy, especially Dr. Rowan Voss. He was one of the hospital's leading surgeons and had spent years building his reputation. Brilliant, demanding, and not easily impressed. He viewed Avon's silence as arrogance. On the 4th day, he confronted her in front of the nursing station. "You seem very sure of yourself for someone new here." Avon was reviewing patient charts. She looked up only briefly. Confidence helps in emergencies. A few nearby staff members glanced over. Dr. Voss crossed his arms. Confidence is earned. She held his gaze for a moment. Then I suppose time will settle the question. It wasn't rude. It wasn't defensive. But it unsettled him. Because she said it like someone who already knew the answer. That evening, as the hospital settled into its night shift rhythm, a storm rolled over the city. Thunder rattled the windows. Emergency calls increased. The trauma unit filled quickly. Avon moved through the chaos without hesitation. She checked on patients, assisted procedures, and helped younger nurses who struggled under pressure. One of them, a recent graduate named Talia Mercer, noticed something others had missed. Avon never wasted motion. Every action was deliberate. Every glance meant something. And when things became most intense, she seemed calmer, as if she had lived through far worse. Near midnight, a patient arrived from a roadside accident. Nothing life-threatening, but he was agitated, frightened, and refusing treatment. The staff struggled to keep him still long enough for proper evaluation. His breathing quickened. He pulled away from every attempt to help. Avon stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She simply knelt beside him and said, "You're not trapped. Focus on the ceiling lights. Count them." The man froze. He looked up. 1, 2, 3. His breathing slowed. Within seconds, he allowed the team to continue. Afterward, Talia approached her. "How did you know that would work?" Avon paused. "People in fear need something stable to hold on to." That sounded practiced. For the first time, something shifted in Avon's expression. A shadow, brief but unmistakable. It was. Before Talia could ask more, Avon walked away. By the end of the week, the staff had formed their conclusions. Some thought she was hiding a mistake from her past. Others believed she had exaggerated credentials. A few assumed she was simply strange. Only Talia remained uncertain, because every time she watched Avon work, she saw not arrogance but restraint, as if Avon constantly held back more than she revealed. Late Friday afternoon, the hospital director requested a staff briefing. Avon stood in the back of the conference room while senior doctors reviewed upcoming protocol changes. Halfway through the meeting, the director announced a high-priority patient expected within days. A decorated veteran with complex trauma history. His identity was confidential. His treatment required discretion and stability. The room took the news seriously. Military-connected cases often carried unusual challenges. As the director listed expectations, he glanced toward Avon for only a second. It was subtle, but she noticed. So did Dr. Voss. After the meeting, he approached the director privately. Why was she transferred here right before this patient arrives? The director gave him a measured look. That information is not yours to request. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. That response only deepened suspicion. That night, Avon stayed late. She reviewed charts alone in the dimly lit station while most staff prepared to leave. Talia returned to retrieve a forgotten notebook and found her there. "Do you ever go home?" Avon smiled faintly. "Eventually." Talia hesitated, then sat beside her. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask." "Why does everyone's opinion not seem to matter to you?" Avon closed the chart. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she answered softly, "Because people often judge what they don't understand. And understanding takes longer than judgment." Talia studied her face. "That sounds like experience talking." "It is." "Military?" Avon looked away. "Something like that." Before Talia could continue, an overhead page called for emergency assistance downstairs. Avon stood immediately. Conversation over. As she walked toward the elevator, Talia noticed something for the first time. A faint scar near Avon's wrist, mostly hidden beneath her sleeve. Not surgical. Not accidental. Old. Deliberate. A story in itself. And for reasons she couldn't explain, it made her realize one thing. This nurse had not come from an ordinary place. She had survived something. Something no one here could imagine. And whatever it was, it had followed her to North Ridge. The storm outside had finally passed by dawn. But inside the hospital, another kind of pressure was building. Whispers. Questions. Tension. Because despite every doubt, every criticism, every sideways glance, the new nurse remained exactly the same. Calm. Silent. Watching. And somewhere deep inside that hospital, behind locked records and unanswered transfers, was a reason she had come. A reason far more important than anyone understood. And before long, that reason would walk through the hospital doors and change everything they thought they knew about her. The veteran arrived just after sunset, when the hospital corridors had begun to quiet and the evening staff prepared for another long shift. Rain tapped softly against the windows, and the emergency ward carried the familiar scent of antiseptic and coffee. No one knew his name at first. He came in under military escort, his record sealed, his identity marked confidential. 2 officers accompanied the transport team, both silent and tense. Their expressions alone told the staff this was not an ordinary admission. The man on the stretcher was in his late 40s, broad-shouldered, with the posture of someone who had spent years carrying more than his own weight. Even while exhausted, there was strength in the way he held himself. But there was something else too. Fear. Not visible in his face at first, but in the stiffness of his hands and the way his eyes moved toward every sound. His breathing was uneven, and he flinched each time someone came too close. The doctors were briefed only on what they needed to know. The patient had a history of trauma-related episodes and had refused long-term treatment elsewhere. This hospital had been selected because of its specialized care. Dr. Rowan Voss took charge immediately. Standard evaluation first, he instructed. Keep the environment controlled. The veteran remained silent as nurses adjusted equipment around him. His gaze stayed fixed on the ceiling, jaw tight, fists clenched against the blanket. When one of the residents attempted to ask routine questions, he turned away. No answer. Another doctor tried to examine his shoulder. The reaction was immediate. "Don't touch me." His voice was sharp enough to freeze the room. The nurse stepped back. Dr. Voss moved closer, his tone firm but professional. "Sir, we need to assess your condition. Cooperation will help us treat you." The veteran's breathing grew faster. "No treatment. You were transferred here for care." I said no. The monitors began to spike. Tension filled the room. A sedative was suggested quietly by one of the residents. But before anyone could prepare it, the patient pushed himself halfway upright. "Don't." The single word carried so much force that even the officers near the door looked uneasy. Dr. Voss signaled for calm. But the situation was slipping. The veteran's eyes darted around the room as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. His shoulders tightened, and his breathing turned shallow. Panic response. The doctors knew the signs, but every attempt to help only made it worse. Then Avon entered. She had been called in from another floor to assist. She stepped into the room, took in the scene, and stopped. For a brief moment, she simply watched him. The veteran noticed her almost instantly. Something in his expression shifted, not relief, not recognition exactly, but focus. Avon moved closer, though not too close. Her voice was calm. "Everyone step back." Dr. Voss frowned. "We're in the middle of..." "Please." There was something in her tone that made the room pause. Reluctantly, the staff gave space. Avon crouched low enough to be at eye level. She didn't reach for him. She didn't ask questions. She only spoke. "You're in North Ridge Medical. 2nd floor trauma unit. No threat present." The veteran stared at her. His breathing remained uneven. She continued. 3 ceiling lights. 1 vent. Window to your left. He followed her gaze without realizing it. 1 monitor behind you. 2 officers at the door. His breathing slowed slightly. "Stay here with me." Silence. Then his eyes sharpened. He looked directly at her. And for the first time since arriving, his voice softened. "Avon." The room froze. Dr. Voss looked between them. Avon's face remained steady, but something deeper flickered beneath her calm. "Yes." The veteran swallowed hard. For a long moment he said nothing. Then his shoulders loosened, and he lowered himself back against the bed. The monitors steadied. No one moved. No one spoke. By the time Avon reached the hospital lobby, nearly half the evening staff had gathered there. Some stood near the reception desk, others along the hallway walls, all staring toward the main entrance. At first, Avon could only see the shape. A large military dog sat perfectly still in the center of the polished floor, surrounded by security personnel who clearly did not know what to do. It was a Belgian Malinois, strong and alert, with a coat that looked darker under the hospital lights. Its posture was disciplined, almost formal. and tied around its neck was a worn armband stitched with the insignia of a SEAL commander. The moment Avon saw it, she stopped walking. Everything around her seemed to blur for a second, because she knew that dog. Not by breed, not by training, by presence. The animal turned its head. Their eyes met, and in one instant years disappeared. The dog rose to its feet. Without hesitation, it walked past everyone else in the lobby. Security tried to block it, but the dog moved with such precision that no one dared interfere twice. It crossed the room and stopped directly in front of Avon. Silence settled over the crowd. For a moment, neither moved. Then Avon slowly lowered herself to one knee. Her hand trembled just slightly as she reached forward. Vex. The dog leaned into her touch. A low sound escaped its throat. Not a bark, not a growl, but something softer. Recognition. Relief. The staff watched in stunned disbelief. Dr. Voss arrived seconds later, pushing through the group. What is happening here? No one answered, because no one understood it. Avon gently removed the armband. Folded inside it was a sealed waterproof packet. Her expression changed the moment she saw it. Dr. Voss noticed. What's in that? She didn't answer. Instead, she checked the dog carefully. Paws, ribs, collar, breathing. Vex had traveled far. Too far. There was dust in his coat and strain in his posture. This had not been a routine transfer. This had been a mission, and he had completed it alone. Avon stood. Clear the lobby. Dr. Voss stepped forward. You don't get to issue orders. Avon met his eyes. This is not hospital business. It became hospital business the moment a military dog walked into my facility wearing classified insignia. She held his gaze for several seconds. Then calmly she said, If you want answers, give me 10 minutes. The certainty in her voice made him hesitate. Reluctantly, he signaled for staff to step back. Avon led Vex into an unused consultation room. Talia followed before anyone could stop her. Inside, Avon locked the door. She opened the packet. Inside was a single folded note and a flash drive. Her hands paused over the paper. Talia watched silently. Avon unfolded it. The handwriting was familiar. Short. Direct. If Vex found you, then trust no one beyond the old chain. File 7 was breached. They are looking for surviving operatives. You were never meant to be exposed. Burn the drive after viewing. See. Avon read it twice, then once more. Her breathing slowed, but her face lost all color. Talia stepped closer. What does it mean? Avon looked at her. For the first time, there was no distance in her expression. Only conflict. It means my past has reached this place. Talia frowned. What past? Avon glanced down at Vex, who sat alert at her side. Then she answered carefully. Years ago, before I became a nurse, I served in a classified field unit overseas. Medical support, tactical recovery, intelligence transport. Talia stared. That's not normal military nursing. No. Avon folded the note. It wasn't. Before Talia could ask more, there was a knock at the door. Dr. Voss. Avon, open it. She slid the note into her pocket and opened the door halfway. He looked from her to the dog. I want the truth. She gave him a measured look. You won't like it. Try me. Avon stepped aside and let him enter. For a moment Vex stood and blocked his path. Dr. Voss froze. Easy, Avon said quietly. The dog sat. That alone unsettled him. Avon held up the armband. This belonged to a commander who disappeared 8 years ago during a covert operation. Dr. Voss narrowed his eyes. And no one outside that unit should have it. His face hardened. You expect me to believe this dog just wandered in carrying classified military evidence? No, she said. I expect you to understand that something serious is unfolding, and your hospital is now connected to it. He folded his arms. You've known this entire time. I knew enough to avoid bringing it here. Then why are you here at all? That question landed harder than he intended. Avon looked away for a second, then answered. Because I was told this hospital was the safest place for someone who needed protection. Dr. Voss studied her. For the first time, doubt in her competence was replaced by something else. Concern. Because whatever this was, it had already gone far beyond his assumptions. Avon inserted the flash drive into the consultation room computer. A video file opened. Static flickered. Then an image appeared. A dim room. A man seated at a metal table. Older, thinner, but unmistakably alive. Commander Callis. The room went silent. Talia gasped softly. Dr. Voss leaned closer. The commander looked directly into the camera. If you're seeing this, then I failed to contain it. He paused. File 7 includes operational records tied to multiple governments and covert recovery missions. If exposed, it will compromise people who were never meant to be identified. Avon's jaw tightened. The commander continued. They are hunting names connected to the operation. Survivors, witnesses, support staff. He leaned forward. If they reached North Ridge, then they know about the veteran. And they will come for the medic they called Shadow 6. Talia looked at Avon. Dr. Voss slowly turned as well. Avon said nothing. The commander's final words filled the room. Protect the record. Trust the dog. And whatever happens, do not let them erase what we did. The screen went black. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Dr. Voss broke the silence. Shadow 6. Avon removed the drive. That was not a name. It was a role. Talia's voice was barely above a whisper. It was you. Avon didn't deny it. The weight of years settled into the room. Everything they had assumed about her, every judgment, every doubt, collapsed all at once. She was not simply an experienced nurse. She had lived a life hidden behind sealed files and forgotten missions. And somehow that life had found her again. Dr. Voss looked shaken. You could have told us. No, Avon replied. I couldn't. Because of secrecy? Because of survival. That answer stayed with him. Outside the room, hospital intercoms crackled. A security officer called for immediate administrative presence. Avon looked toward the hallway. Something had changed. She moved quickly. When she reached the front desk, 2 black vehicles were visible outside the entrance. No sirens. No markings. Just quiet precision. Men in formal military attire stepped out. Not hospital approved. Not local command. Avon recognized the pattern immediately. Internal Retrieval Unit. They had come faster than expected. One of them entered the lobby and spoke to reception. We are here under federal clearance to retrieve military property and interview personnel. Avon stood at the far end of the corridor, hidden from direct view. Vex pressed close to her leg. Dr. Voss joined her. Who are they? People who should not be here. Then what do we do? Avon looked toward the veteran's private floor, then at the drive in her hand, and finally at Vex. Her decision came quickly. We move before they reach him. Dr. Voss hesitated only a second, then nodded. For the first time, he chose to trust her completely, because now he understood. The woman they had questioned for days was the only person in that hospital who knew what was coming. And as the strangers in uniform advanced through the lobby, one truth became impossible to ignore. The past had not returned for answers. It had returned to finish something, and Avon Rhodes was standing directly in its path. The moment the unmarked vehicles stopped outside North Ridge Medical Center, the atmosphere inside the hospital changed. It was subtle at first. Conversations dropped into whispers. Staff who had been moving quickly slowed without realizing it. Even the usual noise of monitors and footsteps seemed to fade under something heavier. Through the glass doors, Avon watched the men in formal military attire step out with controlled precision. They didn't look rushed. They didn't look confused. They looked like people who already knew exactly where they were going. That was what made it worse. Dr. Voss stood beside her, his expression tight. You said they were internal retrieval, he said quietly. They are, Avon replied. And they're here for the veteran? Avon didn't answer immediately. Her eyes stayed fixed on the entrance. They're here for everything connected to him. Talia arrived a moment later, slightly out of breath. "They're asking for administrative clearance downstairs," she said. "Security is stalling them, but not for long." Avon nodded once. "How long?" "Minutes." The word hung in the air. Vex, the military canine, stayed close to Avon's leg, alert and still. The dog's behavior had changed since the arrival of the new vehicles. The calm discipline remained, but there was a tension in its posture now, like it was waiting for a signal only it understood. Avon bent slightly and ran a hand along its neck. "Good," she whispered. Dr. Voss watched her. "You're not going to tell me what's going on, are you?" "I already did," she said. "No, you told me fragments. I want the full picture." Avon hesitated. For a moment it looked like she might actually answer. Then she straightened. "You'll get it when we're through this." That was all she gave. And somehow it was enough for him to follow. Downstairs, the situation escalated quickly. The lead officer from the retrieval unit had bypassed reception and moved directly toward the elevator bank. His authority was clear, even without him speaking much. Security personnel tried to stop him, but he produced a sealed authorization code that made them hesitate. Within seconds, he was on his way up. The hospital director was alerted and rushed toward the command center, but even he seemed uncertain how to respond. "These are federal-level clearances," one administrator said nervously. "We can't refuse them outright." "But they didn't notify us," the director replied sharply. "That usually means urgency. And urgency in military terms rarely meant something simple." On the third floor, Avon moved fast. "Get the veteran ready," she said to Dr. Voss. "He's not stable enough to move," he replied immediately. "He doesn't need to move far. Just out of sight." Talia stepped forward. "Out of sight from who?" Avon looked at her. "From people who want to erase what he knows." That answer made Talia's stomach tighten. Dr. Voss didn't argue further. He had stopped treating this like a normal hospital scenario the moment he saw the flash drive. He signaled 2 nurses. "Prepare a transfer to the secondary isolation room." Quietly, the veteran was confused when they entered. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice rough. Avon approached his bedside. "You need to trust me again." His eyes narrowed slightly. "That sounds familiar." "It should." For a moment, something like a faint smile crossed his face. Then it faded. "They're here, aren't they?" Avon didn't deny it. "Yes." He exhaled slowly. "I thought we had more time." "So did I," she replied. He studied her carefully. "You didn't stay hidden well enough." "I tried. Not hard enough." There was no anger in his voice, only acceptance. That was what made it harder for her, because he wasn't blaming her. He was acknowledging the reality they had both tried to outrun. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Closer now. Talia peeked through the small glass panel in the door. "They're on this floor." Dr. Voss turned toward Avon. "What's the plan?" Avon looked at Vex, then at the veteran, then at the narrow corridor leading to the emergency stairwell. "We don't fight them here," she said. "We move him before they identify the room." "That's not going to last long," Dr. Voss said. "I know." The veteran shook his head slightly. "You're still operating like a field medic," he said softly. "Not a hospital nurse." Avon looked at him. "Some habits don't change." He nodded once. "That's what I was afraid of." The sound of an elevator arriving echoed through the floor. Metal doors sliding open. Multiple footsteps. Controlled, deliberate. The retrieval team was now inside the hospital system. Dr. Voss made a decision. "We move him now." They acted quickly. The veteran was placed on a transport bed with minimal equipment attached. No alarms. No unnecessary devices. Just what was essential to keep him stable. Talia helped guide the bed toward the stairwell exit. Vex moved ahead, leading the path like it had done this before. Avon stayed at the rear, not because she was slow, because she was watching. Every corner, every reflection, every sound. They reached the stairwell door just as voices echoed from the hallway behind them. Section clearance confirmed. 3rd floor, north wing. Avon's eyes sharpened. They're splitting search patterns, she said. Dr. Voss frowned. How do you know that? I've seen it before. They descended one floor quickly. The stairwell was dim, quiet except for hurried footsteps. The veteran spoke again, quieter this time. If they find me, they'll take everything. They won't, Avon said. You can't guarantee that. No, she admitted. But I can delay it. That's not the same thing. I know. They reached the second-floor corridor. The secondary isolation room was just ahead. But as they turned the corner, a figure appeared at the far end of the hallway. One of the retrieval officers. He stopped when he saw them. For a moment, neither side moved. Then the officer raised his hand slightly. Stand down, he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. Avon stepped forward. Turn around, she said. You are interfering with a federal operation, he replied. You are inside a civilian medical facility, she responded. You have no full jurisdiction here. He tilted his head slightly. That is not how this will be recorded. Dr. Voss stepped beside Avon. We have a patient under active care. You cannot remove him without authorization from hospital administration and medical clearance. The officer looked past them at the veteran. We don't need removal, he said. We need confirmation. Avon felt something shift. Confirmation, not extraction. That was worse, because it meant they weren't just trying to relocate him. They were trying to verify something, erase doubt, or erase evidence. Vex growled low for the first time. The sound was controlled but firm. The officer's eyes flicked toward the dog. I suggest you restrain that animal. Avon didn't respond. Instead, she knelt slightly and placed a hand on Vex's shoulder. The growl stopped. Silence returned. The veteran spoke again, more strained now. Avon, don't let them near me. The officer smiled faintly. That won't be necessary, he said. We only need a few questions answered. Avon straightened. You're not questioning him. The officer looked at her more directly now. And you are. That question hung between them. Dr. Voss felt it immediately. The shift, the recognition, not of identity, but of significance. Avon didn't answer the question. Instead, she said, You already know who I am. The officer's expression changed slightly. A pause. Then a subtle acknowledgement. Shadow 6, he said quietly. Talia stiffened. Dr. Voss turned toward Avon. The officer continued. We were told you were no longer active. I'm not, Avon replied. Yet here you are. Avon stepped closer. Leave this floor. That is not possible. The air between them tightened. The veteran suddenly spoke from the stretcher. She's the only reason I'm alive. The officer glanced at him. That is not relevant to current procedure. It is to me, the veteran said firmly. For the first time, the officer hesitated. Avon noticed it. That hesitation mattered, because it meant the chain was not as absolute as it seemed. She used it immediately. You don't want a scene in a civilian hospital, she said. Not with patients nearby. Not with media exposure risk. The officer's jaw tightened slightly. You're assuming we care about optics. I'm assuming you follow protocol. A pause. Then he stepped back half a step. Not surrender. Adjustment. 10 minutes, he said. That is all I can offer before escalation. Avon nodded once. 10 minutes is enough. He moved aside. Not fully, but enough. Dr. Voss looked at her sharply. What are you doing? Avon didn't answer him immediately. Instead, she signaled Talia. Get him into the isolation room. Lock it from inside. Talia hesitated. But, now. Talia obeyed. The veteran was moved quickly inside the room. Vex followed without hesitation. The door shut. Locked. Avon remained in the hallway with Dr. Voss and the officer. For a moment it was just the three of them. Then Avon spoke quietly. You're not here for retrieval. The officer looked at her. No. You're here for containment. Another pause. Yes. Dr. Voss frowned. What does that mean? Avon didn't take her eyes off the officer. It means something larger than this hospital is already moving. The officer finally said, and you are standing in the center of it. Avon exhaled slowly. I know. And for the first time since this began, she didn't look like someone reacting to the situation. She looked like someone preparing for what came next. Because the 10-minute window wasn't a negotiation. It was a countdown. The hallway outside the isolation room had gone strangely quiet after the officer's warning. 10 minutes. That was all they had given. But in a place like North Ridge Medical Center, 10 minutes could feel like a lifetime or a single breath depending on what happened inside it. Avon stood still for a moment, listening to the faint sounds through the closed door. The veteran was inside with Vex, and Talia was with them, keeping the environment stable. Dr. Voss stood a few steps away, watching Avon like he was trying to understand a language he had never been taught. The retrieval officer remained at the far end of the corridor, calm but present, like a reminder that nothing here was finished. Avon finally spoke. He's not the target, she said quietly. Dr. Voss frowned. Then who is? Avon didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the sealed isolation room door. The information inside him is. That sentence changed the air. Not louder, not dramatic, just heavier. Inside the room, the veteran sat upright on the bed while Vex stayed close to him, alert but calm. Talia checked his vitals, but her hands were slower now, as if she understood that medical routine alone could no longer define the situation. The veteran spoke first. They didn't come just to confirm me, he said. Talia looked up. What do you mean? They came because someone thinks I still have access. Vex shifted slightly, ears attentive. The veteran continued, voice lower now. Access to what we carried back. What was never supposed to leave the field intact. Talia hesitated. You're talking about the operation Avon mentioned? He nodded once. The one they erased. Outside the room, Avon heard those words through the intercom monitor. Dr. Voss noticed her reaction. You knew that was coming, he said. I knew pieces, she replied. Not the timing. The retrieval officer stepped slightly closer. The 10-minute window is closing. Avon turned toward him. Then you should decide what you want, she said. His expression remained neutral. That is already decided. Avon studied him carefully. No, she said. You were sent here to contain a risk. But you're standing in a hospital full of civilians. If this escalates, containment becomes exposure. For the first time, something in the officer's gaze shifted. Not doubt exactly, but calculation. Inside the isolation room, the veteran leaned forward slightly. Avon, he said into the intercom system. If they take what I know, it doesn't end here. It spreads. You understand that, right? Avon closed her eyes briefly. I understand. Talia looked between them. What exactly are they trying to erase? The veteran didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at Vex, then at Avon, then finally spoke. A recovery list. Dr. Voss frowned. That's it. It's not just a list, the veteran said sharply. It's every name connected to a series of classified extractions. Witnesses, medics, handlers, everyone who kept certain operations from collapsing. Avon's voice came through the intercom. And File 7 contains the unredacted version. Silence followed. Even Dr. Voss seemed to process that differently now. The retrieval officer spoke again. Time is nearly up. Avon turned fully toward him. You don't want what happens after that timer ends, she said. He replied calmly. That is not your determination. Avon nodded slowly. No, she said. But I know the outcome. A long pause followed. Then, from inside the room, Vex suddenly stood. Not aggressively. Alertly. His body angled toward the door. Avon noticed immediately. So did the veteran. They're moving, he said. The retrieval officer touched his earpiece. Avon didn't wait. She stepped toward the isolation room door. Change of plan, she said. We're not waiting. Dr. Voss moved with her. What are you doing? Ending the exposure before it starts. Talia's eyes widened. How? Avon looked at the door. By making sure they don't get what they came for. Inside, the veteran understood instantly. No, he said into the intercom. Avon, you can't. But she had already made her decision. Dr. Voss grabbed her arm. This is a hospital, he said firmly. We don't operate like this. Avon met his gaze. Then tell me what you do when a threat is already inside your walls. He didn't answer, because there wasn't a clean answer. The retrieval officer stepped closer again. Last warning. Avon finally turned to him. Then listen carefully, she said. You are not dealing with a recovered file. You are dealing with a living system that was designed to protect itself. The officer frowned slightly. That makes no sense. It will. Inside the room, the veteran looked at Talia. You need to move away from the console, he said quietly. Talia hesitated. Why? He gave her a steady look. Because she's about to cut it. Before Talia could respond, Avon reached into her pocket and pulled out the flash drive. Dr. Voss saw it. Avon, don't. She looked at him for a moment. I told you earlier, she said softly. Some things cannot stay stored. Then she broke the drive in half. A sharp snap echoed in the hallway. At the same instant, the isolation room monitors flickered. Inside, alarms spiked briefly, then stabilized. Talia stepped back. What just happened? The veteran exhaled. She just removed the entry point. The retrieval officer's expression changed for the first time. Not anger, concern. What did you do? He asked. Avon held the broken drive in her hand. Destroyed your access trigger. He stepped forward. That data belongs to federal containment. It belonged to people who don't exist in your system anymore, she said. Inside the room, Vex suddenly turned toward the window. His posture sharpened. The veteran noticed immediately. They're not stopping, he said. Avon looked toward the stairwell end of the corridor. Footsteps. More than before. Dr. Voss followed her gaze. They brought backup. Avon nodded once. Yes. Talia's voice shook slightly. Then what now? Avon looked at the closed isolation room door. We finish protecting the only thing they can't replace. The veteran heard her. You mean me? Avon shook her head slightly. No, she said. I mean the truth inside you. The retrieval officer raised his voice slightly. This is your final chance to cooperate. Avon stepped forward. And for the first time since she arrived at North Ridge, her voice carried something absolute. You already lost control the moment you entered this hospital, without understanding what was inside it. The officer's eyes narrowed. That is not a valid statement. Avon looked at him directly. It is the truth. And then the hospital lights flickered. Not a malfunction. A signal interruption. Every monitor in the corridor glitched at once. Inside the isolation room, alarms went silent. Talia turned toward the console. It's offline. Dr. Voss looked shocked. That's not possible. Avon spoke calmly. It is when the system was never local. The veteran understood immediately. They used the hospital network as a relay, he said. But you just cut the bridge. Avon nodded. Yes. The retrieval officer touched his earpiece again. No response. His expression changed. For the first time, uncertainty broke through his controlled posture. What did you do to the network? Avon answered simply. I removed your visibility. The officer stepped back slightly. You've compromised federal communication channels. No, Avon replied. I restored hospital control. A long silence followed. Then distant alarms began to sound. Not inside their wing, but elsewhere in the building. Confusion. System reset. Reauthorization requests failing. The hospital was temporarily blind to outside command interference. Dr. Voss looked at Avon in disbelief. You can do that? Avon didn't look proud. I used to build systems like theirs. That was all she said. Inside the isolation room, the veteran looked at Vex. The dog remained steady. Then the veteran spoke quietly. She's not just stopping them. Talia looked at him. What do you mean? He looked toward the door. She's rewriting the space they operate in. Outside, footsteps stopped. The retrieval officer received another message. His expression tightened, then softened slightly. "We are withdrawing temporarily," he said. Dr. Voss frowned. "What?" He turned to Avon. "This is not over." Avon nodded. "I know." Then he added something quieter. "But you no longer control how it continues." The officer left without another word. And just like that, the pressure in the hallway lifted. Not gone, just shifted. Inside the isolation room, the veteran exhaled slowly. "It's not finished," he said. Avon opened the door and stepped inside. "I know." Talia looked between them. "So what happens now?" Avon glanced at Vex, then at the veteran, then at Dr. Voss. And finally she spoke. "Now we secure what remains, and decide who gets to know it." Dr. Voss crossed his arms slowly. "And after that?" Avon didn't hesitate. "After that, we stop running from it." For the first time since she arrived at North Ridge Medical Center, her expression wasn't guarded. It wasn't distant. It was resolved. Because whatever had been buried in the past had finally reached the surface. And now there was no more pretending it could be left behind.